So last module in there with it. So, and by the way, module B was the largest of the lot in there. So we're on the downward trend anyway.
And
Okay.
I'm gonna apologize because I keep saying 2 and 3. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's A, B, and C.
Yeah, we are using A, B, and C so that it's easier for anybody who's trained for PSA that you don't confuse these because they are not applicable. A here does not directly fit with 1, and especially B and C don't go with 2 and 3 directly. So
So I was not
yeah,
modeling
there,
my own protocol. I'm sorry.
there was method in the madness. Okay, so what we're going to talk about here is the whole kind of putting the whole gamish together. So we're going to talk about the real thing of doing this mapping potential routes of SARS-CoV-2 contamination in the whole operation, and then finding possible ways to reduce those routes that you identified initially, then to either modify or create any standard protocols that you've got that are from those routes you've identified. And from that afterwards, either design or adapt records or signs to help support those SOPs to help reduce SARS-CoV-2 as well as COVID-19 on your farm. So again, sorry, we keep reiterating it, but I don't think you can say it enough. Keep current on local, state, or federal guidelines because everybody's are different. We do include a link in the resources in Module A, and I'll also put it in D here, where you can go to the CDC and get the link to your state's health department in there, which will then direct you to any local ones in there. And then we're just basically following the same general guidelines. Any of the images you see here, we've got the resource for it in the notes and in that separate resource page for that module in there. So again, don't work if you're sick, wear a mask, physical distancing, hand washing, hand washing, hand washing, and then cleaning and sanitizing high touch areas. Clean if it's dirty, sanitize if it's not. So to kind of start the whole thing, it's really easy for people if they just sit down and think of their farm to overlook things. So I think having a visual in there, and if you were in West Virginia and are one of our growers, we do a whole day training on writing your farm food safety plan that came out of with Morris. I retired, though he really isn't retired, extension agent out of Western Virginia in there. And so the first thing we always do in there is talk about getting their map together. So this flat farm is kind of that concept of having a map so that you can start to map out where the risks specifically for SARS-CoV-2. If you did our writing the farm food safety training, you'd map it out for a lot of other things, but that's a whole different training. For SARS-CoV-2, where are our big issues? So again, you don't have to have a farm food safety plan unless you're going to be GAP certified, but it's a great resource. So can't say it enough in there. So here we have the farm that I came up with. Has anybody noticed any unusual things on my farm map? You can put it in the chat and Cindy can see if anybody notices it. Karen, we're thinking of you in particular. So in this kind of training, we want to evaluate where possible problems are. And we'll kind of go through some of these, but as I alluded to before, we've got 3 separate entrances into the farm. Do you really want those entrances all open? Because here somebody could come in the back door, basically in your farm, and if they came in here, you might never know about it, but they may have gone and been into your pumpkin patch in there and with it. Oh, Stacy, Stacy, you get the point. You found the sloth. Oh no, Jessica found it.
Yeah, so didn't Karen.
Yep. So, Karen, so many pooping machines. Yeah. So,
That's good.
so this whole business of having this one here, you also might want to rethink whether or not you want visitors on your farm coming in where your home is. And so there may be some concern about having these open. And I actually would, if this was my farm, I'd be having these blocked off for at least now on there, just because I don't want to have, other people coming in and thinking they can come in those ways on there. So it's kind of using this map as a way to rethink about how you're going to do it. And again, our main one we're worried about is person-to-person transmission in there. And with person-to-person transmission on there, we actually have to think about the people moving in. Animals, yes, Karen, you're right. So many pooping machines. We have to be concerned, but that is less of it. If somebody may have been exposed to SARS-CoV-2, they should not have the job of dealing with the goats in there. Or, well, the chickens are less of an issue, but in there. So we have to rethink about some of these. So we're going to walk through and talk about some of these. So what do you need to evaluate and think about for your farm? So kind of putting this all into a package. First, you really need to have a COVID-19 contact person. Why? So that your staff knows who they need to be in contact with. If they think they may have been exposed, if they are sick, if there's somebody in their family who's sick, you need to have one person so that there is a clear message. You also need that so that if the local health department needs to contact, they knew who that one person is and they will have all the information. How the farm is dealing with SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, both for their customers as well as for their staff. So having that one contact person. Then evaluate. Do you need to have you had any changes in your farm? New policies and practices? Are you doing new trainings? New communications? With SARS-CoV-2, we all changed a lot of things. So if that's the case, you need to go back. Did you have a standard operating procedure on how you did something and now you're doing it differently? Then you need to renovate that, and then you've got to get ready to make sure that everybody gets trained. And remember, you don't just train at the beginning of the season. You might hire somebody midway through. That person has to get trained in there. You may even want to do a refresher where you start your staff off and then you bring in some people for the harvest crew for a certain thing. You may want to refresh everybody, not just the new people, and make sure everybody's on the same one. Up your game, change your style, use videos, use a Flipboard. I found a Flipboard resource that you can download and print off. So use different opportunities for doing the training and the communications, which we've harped on a lot, but both for those people on your farm as well as the people coming to your farm in there, and being very clear, not just to customers, but anybody. So the delivery guy who's coming, the ag service provider who's coming out to your farm, the locksmith who may have to come and fix something, be clear when you have them coming what you expect. Staff situations, talk with your staff. Are they at a higher risk of contracting COVID-19 in there because of health issues, or are there other people in their life that are on the front lines and working in a local hospital? And so that might mean they have potential to be exposed to COVID-19 more than the general public, so that you know that and you can adjust, because you may have to pivot really quickly with that staff member. Again, don't penalize them, but have a plan in place. I'll give you, for instance, my technician and I, once COVID hit and they shut things down, I was able to keep my research lab up and running, but he and I did not see each other for 3 to 4 months. He has a young child, at the time was under 2, and we were very concerned that he that my tech and his wife did not get exposed to bring it home to their child. And so what we did was we worked opposite days in the greenhouse, so that I worked with our grad student. He came in and worked the plants. We harvested. He took care of the plants in between. And literally, first time we saw each other was probably July, and it was across a parking lot. So figuring out ways to do that and work with them. Okay. So creating that culture of safety on the farm, safety for each other, safety for the food that you're producing, all of that is really key in there. And not just with COVID-19, but with all health issues in there. So it's going to be important to put that in place in there. So we've already talked about the first two, talking about considering having the self-screening. You don't want to have that so that everybody has access, but you want to have a way to do that. If you can use an app on a phone that they record it and so you can see that, that'd be great in there. Otherwise, have some systems they can do it. To walk into my building right now, I actually have to have my temperature taken. They have it mounted on the wall, and I have to sign in name, date, time, phone number, and whether or not I've had a temperature over a certain level. Again, changes to communications. We've talked about new signs at the farm and farmers market. It's always good to up your sign level, change them around, move them around, and also change your signs out to keep people remembering what was important in there. All right. So screening for COVID-19, it's really important. You've got to train your staff on the symptoms. Don't just assume that because they're in the midst of the pandemic with you, they remember all of the symptoms. And also make sure they understand how it truly spreads. Not listening to myths, but actually how it spreads based on information. We'll have resources for you. And how they can prevent getting infected themselves or infecting anybody else. We talked about posting signage and then having that virtual or in-person check-in. This image here is a nice one that we actually have the link to because it shows what the symptoms are for coronavirus versus flu and a cold. There's also some that even have allergies. All right. If you have staff that actually have COVID-19, what should you be thinking about putting in place? Number one, they should stay home if they're sick, or if anyone in their home is ill with it in there. If they develop symptoms at work, you've got to figure out how to get them home. That is not trivial. Uber and Lyft will not pick you up if you think you might have COVID-19. One possibility, though they're probably not going to like it, is seeing if you can get the local EMTs to take them home. If they're not well enough to drive themselves, or you don't feel comfortable letting them, because you may not really want to put them in a farm vehicle to take them home. Have flexible policies that can work with staff to stay at home to care for either sick family members or deal with children, because we've had the whole disruption to the educational system and that's made things weird. So you may have to work with your staff on a split schedule in there so that they have time to work with their kids. So they may come in super early or stay later than normal. Then determine if other staff might have been exposed to that person who either has COVID or has been exposed, and then have them take additional precautions. Make sure that they're aware of what they need to be monitoring. And then double check that your human resource policies are consistent with, again, the public health regulations and any state and federal workplace laws. So hand washing, have we said about hand washing enough? You already have heard access to, are there enough mobile ones in there? Make sure they understand when to wash in there, and have that in there so that they think about it, that you wash before they go to eat, after they've eaten, at what point. Do they wash during procedures, um, before putting on gloves, before putting on their mask? Make sure that they kind of have that rundown and don't just assume that they know what that is. Also, who's going to be responsible for those hand washing stations, or even keeping them stocked, mobile ones or physical ones? That's important, because if you run out of paper towels and you're not supposed to use, you know, the hem of your shirt, to dry your hands off, you're supposed to use one-use paper towels, and there aren't any there. Is who's going to go and get those? And who's going to make sure that you have enough backlog of those that you're not going to worry that you're going to have to figure out where you're going to buy them from? So all of those pieces are important. And we harken back to hand washing because it's such a key piece in there. So one of the things I found out this week listening to a couple of trainings is that there's not a lot of help with people on making standard operating procedures. And to be honest, it's a scary thing. If you've never had to write a protocol or procedure and now you're being asked to do it. So we need to give them a lot of technical assistance on how to do this, and that it doesn't have to be huge or scary to do. So here's an example of one of the ones we use from our Writing the Farm Food Safety Plan. Thank you, with Morris in there. Couple of things you'll notice. It's a standard operating procedure. There's the title. It's for proper hand washing techniques for this, for the employees and visitors. The name of the farm has to go in there. You have to make it specific. So you may agree with all this, but the question is do you actually, are you talking about a hand washing station, a mobile one, or is this actually a sink in your restroom? You may need to put in a preamble step to all of this. You guys may have only a soap bar. You may not have liquid soap, so take the liquid soap out. They need to know it needs to be specific to their operation and how they run things. And rubbing hands vigorously together for 15 to 20 seconds. May want more specifics, or may want to also list and look at the sign, the postage that was, or the poster that is posted with the hand washing site in there. So having all of these, and they talk about at the end, dispose of the towel in a proper receptacle. You might list what that proper receptacle, don't just say proper. So making these standard operating procedures, with developed these and got a number from different growers in there that we give access to the people we've trained into it. And the plan is that this is a starting point. You personalize it to your operation, but it gives you a starting point. There are also things like training logs. So if you go and train your employees on how to do this, how to do hand washing, you could list hand washing, SOP, blah, 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 and what date and time, who did it, where you did it, how long the training was, attach or put anything you've got with it, have the employees print their name and sign it, and then you sign and date as the trainer. And by the way, don't forget, it's not just all your employees. If you have any of your family members that help on the farm, they need it too. And you count as an employee. Okay. You'll also want to have signage. So here's another one. This is out of Minnesota. That's a nice, clean 6-step procedure that follows along well with that standard operating procedure. For other operating SOPs that you might need, face coverings, we've talked about that a lot. So again, abide by local and state health departments, CDC guidelines in there. Talk about what's appropriate, or are you going to provide them in there? And whether or not you have to wear it at all times. In some cases, they may need to, and others they may not. So ask for guidance. And if they come to you as a service provider and you don't know the answer, ask, raise your hand, ask us. If we can't find it, we'll see who else we need to find out and put it back to you, as well as put it on the FAQ. But have an SOP on how to actually, when you want them to wear the mask, how to put the mask on, including washing the hands first, and also how to take it off in there. Cleaning and sanitizing, you heard about in Module C. Again, that's create or modify. We're hoping that a lot of people already have some kind of standard operating procedure, and all they need to do is modify it to think about how SARS-CoV-2, they just need to modify that a bit. And it may be in some cases they don't because they're at a higher level. Talk about what sanitizing products you're going to use and if you're going to use a disinfectant in there, and then what kind of log sheets you're going to have along in there. For social distancing, and just by the way, I'm really interested in finding social distancing examples that involve produce. I found lots of ones with animals, pig, cow, alligator, in there. And all I've got here is corn. I really, if anybody has other ones that involve produce, I'd really love to have them and make those available to others. Um, so please send them on. But showing staff what really 6 feet is, giving them things to help them understand how far apart that means. You might need to stagger shifts and break time. So not have everybody come into the break room at the same time in there. Also make sure you get cleaning in between groups. So when a group is finished, they clean before the next group comes in, and that group then cleans before it gets used either later in the day or the next day. And consider alternatives to how you can have your staff be able to have a break or be able to do part of their job and be socially distant. All right, so as I said, here's our flat farm again with some things put into place. So as I had told you earlier, I would block off these other entrances just to make it so that your employees and visitors are only coming in one way, so you limit where your person traffic is, whether it's employees, visitors, etc. Also, I had told you in Module A that the packing house was something where people were coming to get their, say, CSA box in there. And by having people come back there, that puts your employees at higher risk of contact with the general public. And so my plan would have been, if this was my farm, I would have created some kind of building or even a lean-to where you could put in things such as your CSA pickup, but this could also be the farm check-in. So it's right there at the entrance into the farm in there, and making sure that people are following the guidelines. You have everything posted. If you're going to have a visitor's log, you have it right there. If you have on-farm sales, that this could be moved up to the front so that you keep them from coming in on the rest of the farm. So it is less of a problem in there. So just a couple of ideas in terms of how you could make some of those changes to make it easier so that there's less risk to you and to your entire staff, as well as your entire operation of having people come in with it. Cindy, any other thoughts on the flat farm? What else you would implement?
Yeah, one, and I was getting ready to type it into the text. But I look at the packing house, and
Yep.
we haven't created the loading area for that.
Yep.
And, you know, it may be a side door with a pickup truck if it's not a large operation, or it could be a full-fledged one where you've got large vehicles coming in. So that whole idea of, do you want them to access that particular area through the whole farm, or is there a side road with access that would allow them to go behind and not interact at all with the front end of the facility? So just food for thought, and again, whatever's existing may dictate the answer to that. but making provisions for that, recognizing that you're bringing a vehicle in, you're bringing a person in, and so there might be some ways that you could reduce the contact and interruption to the operation.
So we've introduced the flat farm. We also can have the flat town in there. So you see the farm up in the, here we go,
Upper
up in
left,
the upper
left, left
um,
quadrant.
left-hand corner. But to really do that piece that Cindy really talked about in both modules B and C, to think about where else you have people coming in as well as you have people going off, is running through kind of the premise. So somebody had talked about things like neighbors in there. We got a housing development, so some of our staff may live down here. And so not only may the staff come in, but their family may think they can come onto the farm. So that's a concern.
You're getting produce from the farm to Ellie's commercial kitchen down there with Peterson's co-packing.
Yes, I put that in there for there. So if you're driving to the co-packer to give them some of the stuff, or maybe your co-packer is really amazing and they actually come and pick it up from your farm. So depending on whether it's a you going off or them coming on, it's still interaction with other people. So think about if you're delivering to the salad bowl restaurant in there. With it, and how you may have to change. You may not leave bins with them anymore. And or if you do and you pick up those bins, that your staff put that in a separate area. So because those are going to have to be fully cleaned, sanitized, and probably disinfected, just to be careful. Is somebody from Hometown Bank going to come and see you?
Or
Or
you're
you
going to
have
go
to
do a
go,
deposit.
right, exactly.
Deposits are good.
And thank God that we have online banking now. If this was 20, 30 years ago, that would have been a real problem. Is somebody from Ag U coming out to your farm because you've called them, or because they want to come see what your operation is doing?
And we had that mentioned earlier with extension agents doing outreach.
Exactly. Or is somebody coming from the Department of Ag down here? Plus, you might be driving down to set up your stall, or your staff might be at the farmer's market in there. So we've got all kinds of options. We also have a produce aggregator. I kept a hospital in there because you might have somebody who doesn't have COVID, but they may cut themselves and they have to go to the hospital, or the hospital has to send an ambulance out to get them. So bear in mind, that's high risk in there. So if they're coming out on your farm, yes, you have to deal with them to get your employees safe, but then you've got the added problem of now your employees there and they potentially have been exposed. So thinking through all those things on there. So that's what I've added this as a separate page in there, and you can personalize this because the Peterson's co-packer is for Cindy's brother-in-law, and Chelsea's one of my cat's middle names, Leaf's the other. So we made homage to people and things in our life.
But this could very well and very easily represent whoever you're working with, whatever town you're working.
And you can personalize it to it. We kept the one-stop weddings because we were thinking about if you had weddings on the farm in their city hall, you might have somebody coming out from there. So make it whatever you want. It's at least something to go with, and it's all in Excel. If you need any help, let me know. Okay, so then again, we've talked before about who really is allowed on the farm and what kinds of things you're going to require them to follow if they come on your farm. So a screening SOP, we've talked about hand washing, we talked about face covering, social distancing. If there's anything else you need, these are going to be some of the key points that you need to have so that your staff, your customers, and any vendors who are coming on are very clear that you can provide them that before they come and know that they've got that, and the signage and information is up. So when they're there, that they follow the rules to keep not only you and your employees safe, but also themselves safe as well. So it's again that creating that whole culture in there. For any deliveries off the farm, some additional recommendations beyond what we said: limit the number of staff in the vehicle and keep, again, disposable gloves, masks, hand sanitizer in the vehicle, and make sure that gets upgraded or replaced. Communicate policies we've talked about. Consolidate trips and schedule times. So if you know that you're going to come and have to make a couple of different trips, consolidate it so you're out on those trips. You probably are going to want to have your drivers wear face coverings, gloves, kind of up and down. If you have hand sanitizer in between, they could clean or hand rub their hands with hand sanitizer. If you have gloves, they may need to switch in between sites if they go out and interact with anybody or any surfaces. So you have to have a place where they can put the gloves in so that it can be disposed of properly when they're back on the farm. Again, the more you can have them do pre-ordered and prepaid so that that is already done and bagged up before they get there and it's already sold. It makes it easier for the customer, as well as easier for your staff and yourself in there. Use non-returnable containers. If it's returnable containers from something like a farmer's market, that you run into all kinds of risks in terms of what it brings back, not just SARS-CoV-2, but any other human pathogens. So that adds a whole additional level of cleaning, sanitation, and disinfection on your farm. And again, maintain social distancing. Um, for the farm store, if it's on your farm, farmer's market off, again, posting that signage, wearing the face covering so that you model what you want your visitors to your facility to do. Social distancing, either plexiglass, or I've heard people using the clear plastic shower curtains and they rig up some kind of contraption to hold that so it gives a separation. Washing hands if necessary, use gloves for handling produce, sanitize surfaces with an appropriate sanitizer, designate a waiting line that shows that 6 feet separation. If you make it really cute, then kids are going to want to drag their parents to that farm site versus somebody else's. So chalk and making either cute animals if you've got staff who can draw, or flowers, whatever. All right. So in summary, basically, really that one person who's the COVID contact person in there. It could be the same person who does farm safety if you have to have one designated. Um,
I also posted a thing to the group to remember that many of our small farmers, they're going to be the COVID contact person, they're going to be the packer, they're going to be the salesperson at the market. So you need to consider yourself or a sole proprietor as the employee.
yep, yep. So aim to keep yourself, your staff, and your customers safe, as well as any food that you are selling. That is really important. You want them to come back and feel that you have not only a safe product, but you have that food safety culture in there, and that includes keeping everybody safe. Um, Integrating COVID-19 into your farm goes back to, again, assessing the risks for your operation and then bringing in any SOPs to reduce the risks in there, any record keeping, any training that's needed because of that, communicating it with everybody who's out there, and then modifying practices as necessary. And that's one that everybody's going to hate, but right now things are changing. Some things are opening, some things are not. If you're in Canada and Ontario, they're shutting things down again. So it's going to depend. And so it's going to be keeping everybody in communication. So the more you're open with your customers, you're open with your local and state health departments, then you guys can all be working together. The last but not least one in there is networking with other producers. As we said earlier, we really find that our producers are incredibly creative, that once you explain what the confines are and what they need to work within, and they understand that, and it doesn't take much, then they get really creative and don't need to have the $6,000 piece of whatever crazy equipment, and they come up and figure out how to make it for under 500. Um, that needs to be then shared with other producers, and we need to encourage producers to help one another, that they're all in this together, and then also to communicate it to ag service providers and other businesses, because they may have additional access. So you're getting access by having this training, and we're going to have a lot of resources available for you that you can not only give your growers, but if they have some, send it back. We'll put it on the FAQ in there. And then that way, other ag service providers in there can have access to it and see the amazing creativity of your growers and producers or your ag service providers. At this point, I don't care who comes up with it. If it's a great idea, we need to share it. So that ends module D in there. And that's the end of our training. So as I said in the beginning, there will be an evaluation sent out to everybody who registered in there. At some point, there will be a website. Because you registered, we have your email. We will send out once the website is up. They are telling me that the website may be available next week. I don't know how soon I can get stuff loaded, so stay tuned. But as soon as we do have it up and we've checked to make sure all the links work, yes, I do check that. We will make sure that gets mailed out to you, but we will be updating that. The grant runs through at least October, but I believe we may have an additional year beyond that.